Oh, hello everybody, this is Dusty Circuit here, and welcome to the next installment of all the all the projects I've built on Autcraft series. And in the previous episode, I've covered the very first base I built on Autcraft, and in this episode, we're going to cover the next base which I have built, which is kind of basically it was the very first time it was my very first foray into mass automation in Minecraft, or at least on the Autcraft server, and it's also my first large auto sorting system, like for an entire base. And it's should be coming up pretty soon. It's actually over here. And anyway, here it is. And I actually kind of remember it wasn't actually just me who actually worked on this. It was, I think, around the time I was to start building this. I have kind of met Mod Killer and Ninjago, but I was just still kind of getting to know them. And I'm actually still friends with them to this day, but of course these two players are definitely my longest standing friends on Autcraft. And in fact, I wasn't really the kind of player to always put myself out there and just always try to talk to people. I was more I was very much introverted, and I pretty much just spent most of my time on Autcraft just kind of working on my own projects. And I mean, I would occasionally help other players, but I guess most of it I was just still kind of very shy, and also a lot of these projects I'd be working on, they would eat up a lot of my time. And it was like every day I log on to play on Autcraft, it was just another day spent working on this build or my previous base, or it's the previous base I covered in the series, and yeah. And I actually didn't have that many close friends. Like at this point in time, I mostly had Mod Killer and Ninjago, and of course there were those other few players that helped me along the way that I did look up to, but that was really I didn't have that many friends. But it's like I'm the kind of person who would rather have like a few friends that they know very well, rather than like 100 friends that I barely really know better than just any random stranger I would come across. And that was just kind of how I was on Autcraft. And I think I am kind of still like that to this day. But anyway, moving on to this, Of course, a recap of the previous video. At my very first base, I was running into the problem of having almost no space to expand to due to being surrounded by 3 other builds. And I also really, really wanted to get into large scale automation with redstone. And as I had built an auto sorter in one of my bases in my previous survival world that I had lost to that I had lost prior to joining Autcraft, and I actually just really wanted to build another auto sorter. So, and I think it was actually Mod Killer that helped me locate the area to build this base. And of course, in my creative world, I put it in a mountain biome because that was where I built this base on Autcraft. And it was like, and the area we chose was pretty far out. This was probably tens of thousands of blocks out from where my other base was. And I was very much alone out here. Like, there's not very many, like, I could not see another base. And like, even if I were to crank my render distance and go way up high, I could not see any other builds within my render distance, and for quite a good distance. So that pretty much took care of that problem. And I guess without much further ado, let's just go inside and take a look. And how I built this base was that by this point in time, I actually had realized the potential of the shop system that was in place at the time, and I have learned how to use the /jobs, and I think also the mob arena at the time would give you like in-game money, like for I think it was like for every wave you'd win, you would get points, and then I basically just kept playing until I got lots of points. And I think I also would mine in the resource world. Like, in fact, I think I chose the digger job, and literally what I would do is I go in the resource world and just literally just dig up all of the dirt, and really just for the sake of getting points. And I basically just farmed points that way, and kind of, and I actually didn't have an iron farm at the time, so how I actually got all the hoppers required to make this auto sorter was through the in-game shops. In fact, I think they actually, at the time, Autcraft had like a bank, and where you could basically trade in your points for iron, gold, diamonds, and emeralds. And of course, with each of those items being worth successfully more points. And I think you could even exchange iron and gold and stuff for 4 points there as well. And I actually ended up exploiting that to basically get all the iron I would need to craft like every single hopper that I used in this build. And they also had a shop which sold, among many other things, nether quartz, which was also how I got all the quartz to build this. And at the time, and I think I wasn't really that great with building, and I wasn't really sure what build style to go with, but I ended up kind of going with, as you can see, kind of like a futuristic type build style. Because I just figured, well, if this is a big, like automated base, then why not just go futuristic? I guess that was just kind of my thought process at the time. And this auto sorter could hold roughly around, if I would do the math, 180 items, which is quite a bit for especially for me at the time. But of course, later on, I was going to build I actually went to build a sorter that was more than double that, and of course that ran into its own issues of lag, of server lag. But of course, that's for a later video. But of course, this was a really great base for me at the time, and as it really just for me, it was like a way to kind of give me something to do while I was playing on Autcraft, and it just was also a way to kind of like, it was just also a way for me to just build redstone and just kind of like perfect my skills of building redstone, and it's also a way to just kind of follow what my it was just kind of also a way to follow my favorite, like my interests in game. And in fact, I actually had a hobby in which that obviously that of course predates Autcraft, but in which what I would learn how like electronics would work, and I even would take apart like basically like all our discarded electronics that either don't work or we don't need anymore. And I even had I even some of my teachers at school would even like drop off like any of their electronics they don't want anymore, and I would obtain them to take them apart. And I even learned how to build a lot of my own circuits, and I even watched lots of YouTube videos on how to do repair and just all kinds of things, and like what equipment you need, and all kinds of stuff. I might actually I might detail more about this later in future videos on my channel, but anyway, just thought I'd bring it up as it was kind of what drove me to pursue redstone in Minecraft, and also on Autcraft as well. And it just with me, this was kind of like, I kind of saw this as like a skill that not very many other players had, and in a way it was kind of bragging rights for me, because it was like, hey, I built all this by myself. I didn't have any help, and yeah. And And this is kind of a look at the sheer amount of hoppers that I put into this build. And back when I built this, I did not have, this was before I had fly, and in fact I have kind of, for a while I kind of avoided purchasing any of the in-game ranks, like the iron, diamond, and gold. I kind of avoided purchasing that because I was just kind of like my family is just not very high income, and in fact we don't have very much disposable income for me to put into things like hobbies and of course Minecraft servers. And actually for a while I ended up just kind of not like I actually kind of got out of my hobby just because it was getting expensive, and we just my family just didn't have the money for me to just keep buying parts and equipment and things. And yeah, and anyway, this was as for this build, I had the actual design for the sorter. In fact, I think just prior to me building this, Acuena actually showed me an auto sorter that was of course smaller than this, but it was he actually kind of used this particular design, and at the time it was like a way that you could have multiple sorting modules together without them interfering, and it was also one that would be overflow proof. Because like with the more traditional designs would have the issue where if the items would back up too much, they would basically, like the redstone would of course trigger the adjacent sorters, and they basically drop their filters. And that would effectively break the sorter. And of course this design was a way to avoid that problem. And of course later on I discovered a design to do this a lot simpler than this, but this is kind of what I built at the time. And also each of these layers, these levels had basically all of this was like redstone lamps that the ones that you saw in the storage room. And basically whenever items would flow through here, it would, I think this was for like if items would back up in these chests, the light would turn on, signaling that that particular item is getting full. And yeah, I'd say this particular build took me about maybe, it took probably a few weeks for me to actually build that auto sorter, because of course around this time I was still in school, and I kind of had to just put as much time into the game as of course time would allow. And I think of probably over 2 or 3 weeks I basically built all of this here, and that top part of the base I haven't done that yet, but I was basically in that time I made the base like occupiable, and I pretty much moved here from my old base. And another thing about this base is I actually had moved my mining from the resource world actually into underneath my base, because, well, around this time I started using beacons to mine in the resource world, and I ran into a problem where if I would leave my beacon where it is, where I last used it, and come back to the resource world a few days later, it would not be there because someone looted it. And I even made a forum thread kind of complaining about this, and of course many people just kind of replied to, well, the resource world is the resource world, and when you're done using your beacon, just put it away. And well, I mean, I could have done it that way, but whenever I was to go mining, that would have meant I would have to have rebuild the beacon, and whenever I'm done mining, I have to tear down the beacon and put it, like, stash it in my ender chest. And of course, I would have had to have done that every time I was to go mining in the resource world. And I guess just at the time, I was just like, well, to heck with that, and let's just do mining under my base. And that's kind of essentially what I did here. And these doors just kind of led to just more of an access point for the redstone. And I think I had like an access way for all of this as well. But basically, if we continue down, this will eventually reach my mining area. Anyway, it didn't exactly look like this on the server, but basically I had a beacon set up down here, and I would just mine out the entire area, and of course of course, because of the haste, I had instant mine, so I pretty much was able to clear out a huge, like, massive areas underground. And I also had an item elevator where I would put all of my stuff that I would get from mining, and then that would send it all the way up to go into the auto sorter. And I also had built this basically like a storage room for, like, it's mostly like a bulk storage for stone and cobble that I would get from mining. And it's basically like the item elevator would kind of branch off into a sorter that would put the stone and cobble into these chests, and then it would continue up to the main sorter. And it's basically I had a huge amount of automation for that way. And this is one of my most favorite bases, because it was my first foray into automation on Autcraft. And I think kind of later on, I actually added this big, like tower area, just kind of as just because I was kind of bored and I wasn't really sure what else to build here. So I decided I think my plan for this was that I was just going to have like a big floating island supported by a tower, and this would sort of be like a second base. But that never actually panned out because I ran into some kind of server side issues that kind of prevented me from using the space. And it was mostly, of course, me being me at this time, I had no idea what was going on, and I began experiencing at first a problem where redstone clocks and hoppers would like operate slower than they usually would, and that this also affected beacons as well. And of course, now I know this pretty much as low TPS. Like if the TPS on a server would drop due to too many things lagging it down. And but back then I didn't know I didn't know better, and I had no idea what TPS was or what it meant, and I pretty much this kind of led to me kind of really speaking out like on the forums, and I even got pretty like to kind of sum it up. I was basically like, man, these issues are really getting to me. I think really getting on my nerves, and admins, fix this now, or fix this as soon as you can. And it's just that it kind of just like it got into this big like thing that escalated into I think even some staff said, well, gee, this is a multiplayer server, and you should look up what things cause lag first before you build them. And then it kind of eventually led to me getting denied access to the forums for a week. And by then I just kind of was like, okay, I'll just take a break from playing on Autcraft. And I just kind of played a few other games, or like mostly just those online flash games, because that was all I was into at the time. And just basically just found other things to do, just watch YouTube videos and just kind of that sort of thing. And then about a week later, I just kind of went back on to Autcraft and just kind of went with basically just kind of like, alright, I'm just gonna make the best of this situation and just kind of continue playing, and well, as long as things work, I'm happy. But by that point all was good. But then I ran into another issue where like one day the server was really acting strange, and I think like at first it manifested as my beacon would just randomly lose blocks, like they would disappear for whatever reason, and I kept going to the bank to buy iron to replace the blocks, and eventually this kind of led to me almost spending all my points because the blocks just kept disappearing. But I think at one point that actually stopped happening, where the blocks would still remain where they are, but I think like it was described on the forums, there were some problems because at this point in time the world had gotten so big that, of course, I kind of described this in the previous video, but at this point in time the world on both of Autcraft's build worlds got so large that I think it was actually like on the actual hosting company side, they were running out of storage space. And I think what was happening is like just a lot of chunks were corrupting, and it's just there was a lot of data loss, I guess, and it was that was kind of leading to this kind of weird behavior. At least that's kind of from what I can understand. And basically, they were able to fix those issues, but for a little while they weren't able to fix the lag issue. And at one point, I remember Autism Father himself actually requested when I was in this base for me to actually teleport to spawn, just kind of in an attempt to rule out this base as a potential source of lag on the server. And that was kind of far enough back where I don't really remember if that was really conclusive or not, but anyway, it's, actually for a little while I kind of still was using this base, but then I ran into a problem where, like in a certain chunk, like in this area, it's like I'd notice if I opened a chest, it would be silent. It would not make that noise, and hoppers would basically cease to function. Like they would not transfer items at all. It's like they would behave as if it was powered by a redstone torch. And that issue, like I found that if I break and replace the chests and the hoppers, that would temporarily solve the problem, but then it would come back. And I think it even spread to it. I think even a few other chunks were also affected by that same issue. And that was ultimately what ended the space for me, because it was like, basically by that point, it's like the base was permanently ruined, and it's like I couldn't. It was a server side issue, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I even around this time I started talking to another player who was known as Redstone Nerd, or I'll put the username up in the video. But anyway, I ended up kind of talking to him. I think I got into some kind of a conversation where I was having problems with my sorter and or whatever, and then he talks about, well, he's having the same problem in his base, and I think he even talked about that he too had to break and replace chests and hoppers to fix that problem. And I think also on the forums, a lot of players even mentioned that they had to remove a lot of their redstone, or at least remove a lot of their hoppers in their builds, because they caused lag. And of course, well, by this time Discord wasn't a thing yet, and I haven't even started voice chatting yet. So basically, really how I interacted with people on Autcraft was the forums or in game, and I kind of, for the most part, I tried to make the best of things and kind of work around those issues. But by the time I got the bad chunks, I basically just kind of dumped the space, because at that point it was just getting too problematic, and I was just constantly having problems, constantly having issues, and at that point I was just like, I just wanted to move on to something new, and that's just eventually what I did. But also by this point in time, something happened that was that really kind of upped my mood, and it was to do with actually a teacher that I had in school that I'm going to talk about possibly in the next installment of this series. But it was basically involved a new player joining the server, and I basically decided to build a new base next to their base, and I did ask them before I did that, and they said they were cool with it. So I pretty much ended up building another base just to really for the sake of getting out of this, just getting out of the uh, this problem that this base was becoming, and I mean, and for the time that I was building this base and the time it was I enjoyed this space. I really did enjoy the space, and it was, as you know, it was my first foray into redstone and like automation on Autcraft. But it eventually, it just turned out. I guess the server was kind of just. There's kind of this running joke where it's like while players would refer to the server as Bessie, and it was like whenever the server's having problems, it's like Bessie done goofed or Bessie done messed up or whatever, and it was really funny and kind of cute. And of course, that's still actually that joke is still kind of ongoing to this day. And it was like at the time, I was like, well, Bessie done claimed my base or done eat it up for breakfast and spit it out. Yeah, and basically, I guess you get the joke there. But anyway, yeah, and think it was by the probably around November or kind of late in the year of 2014, or I think it might have been around Christmas. I'm not sure when that. I kind of just said I just kind of said my goodbye to this built base forever, or well, not forever. I just kind of it just became kind of one of my secondary bases when I decided that I was going to build my next base next to the new player's base, and that became one of my that actually joined my circle of friends, which I'm going to be talking about in possibly the next video in this series. And I want to say I have kind of learned a few lessons from this base, but I actually haven't. It took me a few more, and it took me I'd say it probably took me several more like farms and one more big auto sorter for me to finally learn that this wasn't viable to do on a multiplayer server just because of the lag would just get too much. And anyway, thank you all for watching this video, and Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and all that. And this is Dusty Circuit signing out, and stay tuned for my next video of this series. Bye.